Good morning.
Good morning.
Today is November 6th. November 6th, 2022. Today is also the largest group we've ever had joining us live. So welcome. That must mean there's a lot of new people. That's pretty cool. We've never had anywhere near this amount of people before. That's very exciting, and the numbers keeps going up. Wow. So maybe we should do another little review. We did one last week, but obviously there's a lot of new people today. So I think that would behoove us to do a review. Let's set, for those of you who are new, the first thing we always do in this class is we set our intention. This is a meditation class, but it's also through a Tibetan Buddhist perspective, really. And the first component of any Tibetan Buddhist practice is setting our intention and making aspirations. And we use the four immeasurables prayer to do that. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. We say this prayer about all beings, all sentient beings. We're not qualifying who's worthy of our aspirations for happiness or who's not, because if everyone was truly happy and enlightened, we'd live in a very different society. So we're not talking about the just and the unjust and the deserving or the undeserving. We're just talking about being a benefit for all beings. That's always the first component of any Tibetan Buddhist practice. Then comes the main practice, whatever that is, of meditation. It could be liturgical practice like a sadhana, or it could be your visualization, a mantra recitation, or meditation. And then the final component, the third component, is dedicating the merit. So the good energy, the good karma we generate from doing a practice, then the third component, we dedicate that merit for the benefit of all beings, not just, it's not just for ourselves. So we're kind of supercharging the positive energy generated. Using that, we use that example of a drop in the ocean becomes the ocean. So let's do a little bit of review. We're going to do a brief one because we have on our, and Nick is our producer, Nick Solidago. Please post the website where they could find the videos. Our videos are archived. The first two videos of this year have a very detailed review of the basic technique. And those of you who have never done this and don't know the basic technique, we'll go into it a little bit, but just do your best. Do not be discouraged. Meditation is not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. And it's not something that you master in a day or a week or a month. It's not something that some people are more suited to and others. Anybody could do it. It's hard for everybody. I also want to just say this. Don't get caught up in the idea of being a good meditator. Don't get caught up in the idea of mastering meditation. This is not the greatest example, but it's like being a musician and wanting to make music and just wanting to play scales really well. Meditation is a method of dealing with the mind. Now, the teachings of the Buddha are very, very vast, yet it can be distilled into three very kind of simple components. A, do no harm. Very simple, very logical, very sane, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't, use harmful speech, logical, sane, ethical behavior. Number two is do good, cultivate virtue, like generosity, like compassion, like love, like loving kindness, generosity, patience, all those good things. Number three, tame the mind. Taming the mind we do through meditation, getting familiar with how our mind works so we can begin to have some, I mean, basically have some control over how we direct the mind, you know. Since everything we do starts with the mind, right? All our actions of body and speech begin with the mind, with a thought and impulse, and controlling that so we can direct it in the way that are in harmony with those first two aspects of doing no harm and cultivating virtue and doing good. That takes control of the mind. That's what really we're doing. We are working with the mind to give it more space, to give it more room for kindness, for generosity, for patience, for to be able to see, you know, more of the truth of the way things are, the truth of who we are, the truth of existence, you know what I mean? Which in a Buddhist perspective comes down to three things. Impermanent. As beings, we are all impermanent. Actually, everything material is impermanent. Everything compounded will eventually, anything that's been brought together, comes together, will kind of disintegrate, will dissolve, will fall apart. We will die. We are interdependent, which means none of us exist as an island. Everything, this glass, a very rudimentary example, this glass of tea, somebody made this glass, or some machine, or somebody designed a machine that made this glass, or somebody painted this and designed this logo. This tea was cultivated by tea growers and harvested by people and then packaged and then shipped and then somebody delivered it, you know. There's a chain of many, 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 many hands just in this glass of tea. Now apply that to more profound things, or things of greater consequence in our lives, things that have a lot more things to do with life and death and harmony and disharmony. Interdependence is the way we exist as beings. And the third is a concept of shunyata, which is the hardest really to deal with, which is that basically our true nature is empty of inherent existence, meaning how we perceive ourselves in our relationship to the world is a very subjective point of view, limited by the capacity of our mental faculties and sense faculties, you know. But in essence, we don't really know who we are. We know through science that we're made up of some kind of electrons, which are broken down into subatomic particles, which are really kind of waves of energy, which is our true nature. Where if the theory of the Big Bang is true, we're born out of stars, you know. Buddhism has a view of ultimate truth, which is non-dual, which is that there's a unity to everything in existence, and that our perception of a ego or an I that exists apart from everything else is a kind of an illusion that's based on our subjective, idiosyncratic, individual tendencies and habitual patterns through our limited mental and sense faculties. That's a lot to swallow. We don't need to get caught up in all that. Let's just let's meditate. That's why most of you are here today. So the first thing we do is we take our seat. And when you take the seat, you know, following up on the first component, which you're setting your intention and aspirations for the benefit of all beings, you can take your seat with that same intention. And you can also take the seat with an intention of self, with a certain amount of pride, not arrogant pride, but confidence that what you're doing is sane, what you are doing has meaning, what you are doing is worthy of your attention and your effort. And you're almost taking your seat with a certain regalness. I don't mean a haughtiness and an arrogance. I mean a dignity and a sanity and a faith in the ultimate goodness that exists within you, the ultimate, the real fundamental decency that exists when all the negative obscurations of our ignorance is cleared away. What's left is goodness. What's left is a kindness that the basic nature of humanity has. Love, Buddha nature, they call that. We're not trying to get enlightened. Enlightenment, and from a Buddhist perspective, is already within. We have to clear away the junk, the mental junk that we've been habituating over our lives and maybe countless lifetimes. And if we do that, we can taste and start to tap into the inherent enlightenment, which also encompasses kindness and love and compassion and patience and generosity. Those things are natural and innate. What's not innate is hate and violence and all those negative emotions. Those are acquired. Okay, so take your seat with sanity and dignity and self-respect. Okay, so I sit in kind of a cross-legged, I don't know if you could see that, kind of a cross-legged position, right? You can, if you're flexible, you can do this kind of half lotus-y type thing, or just like this. What's important is that your hips are either level to your knees or above your knees. So you might need, some people can sit on the floor very comfortably. Some people need a cushion to keep their hips level or above. Some people need a high cushion. The important thing is to be comfortable. Some people may, because of certain physical situations, need to be in a chair. That's okay, but the same thing applies. Your hips should be either level or above your knees, and your feet should be on the floor, and your back should be straight. You shouldn't be in some kind of reclined position. So we're seated, our backs are straight, they're not rigid, our shoulders are not back like in some kind of military attention position. We use that example of a guitar string. When it's too tight, it doesn't make a sound. When it's too loose, it doesn't make a sound. When it has just enough tension, it does make a sound. So we're erect and straight, but not rigid and tense. Very important. Hands, you can rest down on your knees like this, or we do this thing with left palm open and the back of the right hand goes on top, and we curve it and rest that in the lap. Thumbs touch. Or you can have it here or here. Some people touch the thumb to the ring finger. Whatever's comfortable, you can play with that, and see what works for you. So you have your hands, we have back straight. The head can be tilted a little bit down to take some of that tension off the neck. Because again, we want to be relaxed. Okay. The mouth, the lips should be closed, but the teeth are slightly apart. The tongue is resting against the place where the teeth and the roof of the mouth meet. And we're going to breathe through our nose. If this is not possible, then breathe through your mouth. So feel that. You're seated, your hands are in a position and relaxed. Your back is straight, your shoulders are relaxed. Your head is slightly tilted, your mouth is closed, your teeth are up against where the roof of your mouth and your upper teeth meet. And in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we keep our eyes open. Maybe we'll go into why later. It's not necessary, but we leave our eyes open, which might be different for some of you who have tried meditation in the past. We don't use a spaced out gaze, nor do we use some intense, locked in, laser-like gaze. Whatever you're looking at, and you can look at whatever's in front of you. It could be the wall, it could be a view out the window, it could be a flower, it could be a picture of the Buddha, it could be a cup of tea, it could be us sitting here and you're looking at a screen. But whatever you're doing, it should be a light gaze, like a very relaxed gaze. You're just kind of lightly focusing on it. Take a breath now. And we're not doing a really deep breath. We're not doing a shallow breath, a relaxed, even breath. Focus on the place where the air is going in and out. So that's right here, where the nostrils and the upper lip meet. Let's do 3 breaths and just focus your attention. So we have the physical pose here, posture. Just focus your attention on the movement of that breath for 3 breaths. Very good. That's basically the physical aspect of meditation, the physical technique. So for those of you who've never done that, you've just done that. Now, the tricky part comes, say we're going to time ourselves and do, in this class, often we do short bursts of meditation, 9 minutes or so. You're going to time yourself for 9 minutes. We're going to do exactly what we just did. Now, also, I should say, if you need a bit more oxygen and want to take a deep breath, that's fine. But then once you get that, it's probably best for you to settle into a more relaxed breath. But basically what we just did in those 3 breaths on a physical level is all we're doing. What's going to happen when we set aside our time, when we start timing ourselves, right? We start sitting, we start breathing. You're going to start thinking, because that's what the mind does. This does not mean you're unsuited to meditation. This does not mean you can't do it. This does not mean you're doing it wrong. This doesn't mean you're not getting it. This doesn't mean your mind is busier than most people and it's impossible for you to do this. This is natural. This is what the mind does. This is why we meditate. Really, really hear that. Because everybody I talk to who've never done it, and myself included, say the same thing. I've tried it, I can't do it. My mind is so busy. I have so many things going on that I can never possibly do that. What you're going to see, if this is, if you've never done this before, is just how busy the mind is. That's why it's a little bit overwhelming, because that busyness, we've grown so accustomed to it that it's become natural, our natural way of being. And when we actually calm everything down physically and start to really watch the mind, we see how busy it is, and it's kind of overwhelming because we're not used to looking at it. We're used to just being in it. We're used to being carried by it and carrying it. So we have 3 techniques that we use in this class on working with the thoughts, working with the mind. Let's start with the first technique, which is we're going to do exactly what we just did. You're in the pose, you're seated, you're cross-legged, you're in your chair, your arms and hands are relaxed, your mouth is closed. Let's do 3 breaths again. And I'm going to talk you through at some point on how to work with the thought. Let's do the 3 breaths one more time. Mouth is closed, eyes are in a relaxed gaze on whatever you want to look at in front of you. Now, I'm hearing a siren, which makes me think of there must be some emergency. Something, hopefully someone's not hurt, something's not life-threatening. Now, that thought has entered my mind. Since I'm meditating, I want to work with those thoughts. And what do I do is the key, the whole crux of this thing, the fulcrum of this practice is becoming aware of the thought, becoming aware of what the mind's doing. So now I'm aware, because I just told you, I'm aware that I'm thinking about this siren. And I take that awareness and go back to the breath. I take the awareness from that distraction, that siren, and now I move my awareness to that spot where the nose meets the upper lip, and I go back to the breath and I put my attention. Go back to breathing. Put your attention on that spot. Put your focus, put your mind on that place, and just feel that air going in and out, and breathe. 3 more. Now I'm thinking, am I communicating this properly to you, you who are listening? So I'm aware of that. Go back to the breath. Having the thought is not a mistake. It's not wrong. The key is not to follow the thought and start to kind of obsess on it. I'm doing this wrong. Should I do it better? How can I do it better? What should I be saying? I'm not doing that. I'm just becoming aware of it. I'm not engaging with the thought. I'm not even pushing it away or rejecting it. All I'm doing is becoming aware that there's a thought and then putting my attention back on this breath, movement of breath, and where it is. So let's do that. Now I'm going to introduce another technique. And this is really beyond a technique. It's kind of a point of view, really, that should help you. We imagine our mind, what we're working with, this as this very vast, clear, unstained, limitless, calm, open, spacious, quiet blue sky. That's the true nature of our mind. And we're going to settle into that, have that image and settle into that, and know that that's there. That calm, that spaciousness is actually the true nature of your own mind. And it's always accessible if we know how to do it. Sit in your posture, breathe as we've been breathing, and imagine that. Imagine your mind as this limitless, clear blue sky. Now I'm here in a helicopter because there's a marathon today in New York. I'm going to leave that thought where it is. I'm going to notice I'm thinking. And instead of going back to the breath, to that space between the nose and mouth, I'm going to imagine that thought of the helicopter and the marathon as a cloud that has arisen in the sky like nature of my mind, the sky that is my mind, the sky that I imagine my mind to be. And keep breathing. And then I'm going to watch that cloud in my mind disappear, dissolve back into the sky from where it came, settle back into that calm, back into that clarity, back into that spaciousness. When a cloud dissolves back in the sky, it ultimately leaves no trace, no stain, no mark, no nicks, no dents, nothing. It's completely temporary, arisen through causes and conditions related to our own mental and physical habitual patterns and tendencies. So we're breathing. We're in our position, our pose, breathing through the nose. If you're uncomfortable and you need to shift your position a little bit, that's okay. You don't have to be locked and not move at all. Relax, breathe. Notice what your mind's thinking. Notice what you're thinking of. Am I doing this right? When is this going to end? When is he going to talk about something more interesting? Whatever that is. Oh, it's a cloud that's arisen in the sky-like vastness of my mind, and it's going to dissolve. And then I'm back in the sky. Okay? Let's do 5 minutes of this. Exactly what we just went through. Just do that. Either technique is fine. You're in your pose. You take your seat with great dignity, responsibility, self-dignity, sanity and pride, self-respect. Are you going to breathe? I just started thinking, who's going to win the marathon? So there, that now I'm aware that I imagine that thought as a cloud dissolving into the sky-like nature of my mind. Settle back into that sky-like nature. I have a thought of what I need to do tomorrow morning. Instead of following that thought and figuring out what I need to do, I'm going to bring my attention back to that space between my nose and upper lip and continue the breathing. I may have to apply one of these techniques incessantly. That does not mean I'm doing a bad job. That's the practice. We're becoming aware of what our mind is doing. I'm aware that I'm not feeling so good because I had my booster yesterday. I'm going to imagine that thought as a cloud in the sky like stainless vastness of my mind and watch it dissolve. And I'm going to relate to that sky-like nature. I'm going to try to settle into it mentally and physically. Know that it's always there. Breathe from it, breathe into it. That's you. Back to the breath. That could be your mantra. You get lost in thought, caught up in thought, doubt, anger, emotion, whatever it is. Emotion is similar to thought. It's like a more supercharged thought in a way. It comes up, you recognize it, back to the breath. Focus your attention back on the breath. Breathe. Back to the breath. No matter what the thought is, it's not, doesn't matter if it's important, trivial, crazy, ridiculous, worrying, obsessive, horrible, doesn't matter. Apply the technique. Back to the breath or the cloud dissolving. Back to the breath. Relax. Rest in this natural great peace. Take a deep breath if you need it. Settle. What's your mind doing? Back to the breath. Great. Fantastic. Fantastic. For those of you who want a review again, YouTube, Meditation with Michael Imperioli on YouTube has the first two classes of 2022, January, whatever those two dates are, has detailed review, or solidagoproductions.com. I'm really thrilled so many of you have showed up today. That's really cool. We have a Q&A function on here. If you have any questions, put them on there. We'll get to them. Victoria is going to speak a little bit to you, and we'll get to questions in a little bit.
So, hello everyone. Last week we spoke about righteous anger. What is the nature of that? Is that even something that is correctly phrased? What's the substance of it? And there was not really enough time to discuss it, but in Buddhism, there are kind of, when we say the word Buddha, it's the state of mind that we experience. It's the seat, the spaciousness that we take. And we either experience the clarity of mind when we hold the seat, when we have the presence, or the sky becomes very clouded and overtaken by a storm of our afflictive emotion. We cannot have clarity and afflictive emotion at the same time. The sky cannot be free of clouds and have hurricane level clouds at the same time. So holding the mind is having the clarity and a cloudless sky, holding our seat, being aware, or we lose our awareness and we venture into the territory of afflictive emotion. And so it's a very difficult topic because we all have people in situations that very correctly give rise to certain afflictive mental states. But the point is, even when we experience momentarily afflictive states, like any kind of addiction, we know that once the addiction sets in, we have lost our freedom and we have lost our clarity. We are no longer in our seat. The sky is covered. We don't know that there's blue beyond the clouds. We've lost everything. So it's very, very important to know that when we have afflictions, when afflictions are raging through us, we speak about the 5 poisons, the 5 afflictions in Buddhism. We have to know that at that time, our Buddha nature is obscured to such a point that the rays and luminosity of the sun, the blueness, can no longer even penetrate. And those are the kinds of spaces that we often habituate and we defend. And when we defend them, it's tantamount to not having the presence of our mind and not being able to control or act in any way, which could be called free. So the question becomes, we have to understand the construct of the afflictive emotion. Afflictive emotion is a complexity where the ego feels that something is against it, someone didn't give me something, somebody didn't look at me the right way, they didn't do what I wanted, I didn't hear from them what I anticipated. At the bottom of any self-affliction is always, the cause is always self-grasping, and the result is always suffering. So that's how we know if we are being clear-minded and we're holding our seat, we are in presence of our Buddha nature, of the open blue sky, or we're in the grasp of the afflictive emotion. And the question becomes, do we want to be right or do we want to be free? When we imprison ourselves and others in the prison of our rage and our anger, of our impatience and our self-complaint and self-pity, because any affliction is an absence of clarity, we are moving away from the basis of our awareness. We are moving away from the clarity and freedom to decide. We give that up the moment we let affliction rage, whichever affliction, whichever addiction. Afflictions don't let us decide. They hurl us within the space and the energy of that affliction. Affliction is a hurricane. And in that space, we see nothing but the hurricane, the anger, the rage, the complaint. We see nothing but that. And in that movement, we lose everything. So do we want to be right, or do we want to be free? Do we want to be right, or do we want to see, really see as things stand? If we want to be right, then we stay with the prison we erect. We have the construct of anger, and we have the construct of blame. And when our mind is filled with this energy of affliction, it's as if the blue open sky of our awareness is lost to the hurricane cloud cover. The moment we envelope that sky in nature into an affliction, all we become is the energy of that affliction itself. We are the anger. We are the jealousy. There's almost no room left for anything else. All we do, all we say, all we act is that energy of affliction. And please know that no one creates the cloud cover but us, and no one but us allows this cloud cover to remain. Our anger is something that is brought from the inside. It has no cause anywhere else. It is a response that we choose. It is our choice to perceive through that filter. No one can cause us to see anything but our own mind. Everything is a choice when it comes to our own perception. And if we can look at the cloud cover, which has taken over the sky of our mind, we can pacify and dispel the darkness because there's no one else who can do it for us. Buddhists cannot illuminate us. Buddhists can show us the way, the map. They are the example. They are the space of luminosity, but no one can take our hand and bring us there. We have to do it for ourselves. That's why Buddhism is not considered a philosophy, a religion, an academic point of view. The word Buddha means awakened one, and it is for each and every one of us to experience experientially that state of mind, not just read about it, talk about it, pretend, that it's happened, identify with it. It's for all of us to experience that state of mind. That's why we sit down. That's why we take the seat. That's why we, take the time. And all the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha are the ways to come to experience, to experience our own innate nature. Buddhism, if we're going to call it something, a philosophy or a religion, is nothing but all the means and the methods to come to that experience. That's why we can't just relegate this to some kind of a tradition or a philosophy or a point of view. We have to experience it. Otherwise, we don't really know what we're talking about. It's just another kind of, in our intellectual library, we have another book. And why do we want to experience that nature of mind? Why do we want to be awake? Why do we want the Buddha element? Is so that we can be free of the afflictions, so that we can remain in the seat of the sky of our nature and its natural effects, such as kindness and love and patience. Those are natural outcomes of when the mind is left in its space and it truly sees. Now, if the mind is covered by the cloud of affliction and everything goes through the filter of that affliction, we see nothing. We see only the affliction. So we have to liberate our minds of affliction and addiction and of self-grasping, because affliction only arises out of the basis of self-grasping. We have to own our states of mind, and we have to stop saying to ourselves like little children, he made me do it, she made me do it, he said this, she did this. That's impossible. No one has entered our mind. No one has picked up our hand with a weapon, and no one has placed harsh words on our tongue. We have selected that. We have allowed that. Each time we say, he made me angry, she made me angry, it's his fault, it's her fault, we give up our power and we give up our clarity to self-grasping, because we're just fighting for something that is very important to our ego, while in the bigger picture, it's really not that important, because we have to remember the interconnectedness, and we have to remember impermanence. That anger, that person, those words will vanish in the next day or in the next week. I won't remember any of it. Uh, our suffering and the causes of suffering are never anyone else. It is always and unmistakably our own self-grasping. That's the first two noble truths, suffering and the causes of suffering. If we can see this and if we can know it, we know the empty nature of affliction. We can be patient. We know that it's going to subside like a cloud. It will dissipate into the sky of our awareness, and we don't let it out of our control. It will liberate itself by itself. The cloud will dissolve by itself into the sky. We just have to take our seat of awareness, bring awareness into that open, break the cloud cover, and see to our nature, see to our Buddha nature, to our mind. Only we can liberate our mind away from affliction into the luminous clarity of holding the seat of awareness. Or the other option is that we sit around in shrinks offices for 20 years. We talk about dead people that still hurt us. It's amazing that dead people still hurt us. They're so powerful. But actually, it's only our self-grasping playing with us and our habitual regurgitation, our addiction to negativity and blame. It's our mind that's being addicted to negative content and experience. And we experience the suffering because we're causing it by engaging in those states of mind. So ultimately, it's about owning our experience by cutting this ignorant notion that we see, that what we see is exactly as it is, that our experience is objective, that we experience reality. That is a childish notion, has to be replaced by reality of how our consciousness operates. And if our consciousness is boiling or burning, everything that we see and perceive will be boiling and burning. And if you meet a person who's filled with hate and you become infected by that hate, do you really believe that you can put out fire with fire? Because that's really not possible. So we have to become aware of how our mind operates. And we have to know that only water can put out the fire. So if we don't bring down the temperature of our affliction and we don't bring love back, we cannot counter the hate. Only love can counter hate. Only water can put out a fire. And that's what it means taking one seat. And that's what it means, the answer to the question, do we want to be right or do we want to be free? And it's really about owning our emotional states and our mental states and being aware of what really goes on internally. It's not about being hijacked by an afflictive emotion and say, he made me do it, he said bad things. Yes, it's all true. He may say bad things, he may do things. And please go ahead and do experience your affliction for a moment. Get angry, get jealous, experience ignorance, but do it only for a moment. Don't linger, don't indulge, don't let it take over your entire life. Don't think about that same thing he said tomorrow. Don't think about the hateful thing, a week from now. Don't keep going back into that space. Try to experience the emotion, look at it, know that it's going to dissipate if you don't attach to it because of desire to attach to it, desire to blame, desire to hurt, desire to, that's why we attach to negative emotions. Know and experience that desire to be free, desire to be unafflicted, and desire to own your mind and therefore your action of body, speech, and mind from that seat. And so that's it. That's what I want.
Thank you very much. So we'll go to we have a lot of questions today. So many new people, which is great. If we can't, or we may not be able to get to all your questions, we have an email. Nick, can you post the email address that you can kind of contact us? And I'll give you that in a minute. Someone's asking about if when we die, our energy isn't us, as you discussed before, what is left to linger in this realm? Consciousness. So consciousness, we construct this vision of ego, right? We label ourselves. I'm an actor. I live here. My name is this. I am so-and-so's friend. I am, these are all temporal, concepts. They really have no essential nature in our consciousness and our minds, because the mind is the only thing that that doesn't be destroyed. Consciousness, you know what I mean? Consciousness is really inseparable from that non-dual oneness that we're talking about. So it's consciousness that goes on.
It's consciousness and the imprints of our actions of body, speech, and mind. So if the imprints are put onto our stream of consciousness by repetitive actions of body, speech, and mind. So if our thoughts are compassionate and good, those will be the imprints. If our actions are positive and beneficial, those will be the imprints. So it's very important what we do say and see, especially on a repetitive basis.
This person's asking about when I meditate, I instinctively close my eyes. Is that okay? I mean, there's nothing like wrong or not wrong. She said, why do Buddhists keep their eyes open? There's many different types of Buddhism. Usually they're divided into where the country in which it kind of took root, but in Tibetan Buddhism, often, and what we practice, we keep our eyes open. Basically, from my point of view, it's because in life, right? Because we're meditating, we're practicing so we can live better. You know what I mean? So we can live more in tune with our true nature. Most of our living doesn't happen on the cushion. So if we meditate with our eyes open, it becomes easier to translate that practice towards day-to-day life. That's just it. But if you really feel somehow it's interrupting you and distracting and you need to close your eyes, you can do that. Should we treat people with kindness and patience who are not treating us well, or even abusive people who hurt others?
When we treat people with love, it is that we treat people out of the freedom of our mind. You don't have to think and anticipate their response. It's all about the seed from which your activity arises. You ask yourself, what is the state of my mind? Am I acting now from freedom? Therefore, I'm benefiting, I'm loving, and I'm being kind. As Buddhists, we really never care about their response. We are not monkeys. We are not performing for the audience. What we are doing is we're cultivating pure and free states of mind. So yes, absolutely, and unquestionably. And one more thing that we always rely on is remembering that all sentient beings, no matter how deluded and how they appear right now, we all, bugs, animals, and all sentient beings have Buddha nature, and eventually it will awaken.
And also, I mean, we say this a million times too, treating people with kindness and patience, being a Buddhist, practicing mindfulness or Buddhism, does not mean being a doormat or a masochist, you know what I mean? And allowing people to abuse. Sometimes kindness and compassion comes through opposing abuse and hatred, and finding a way to teach a lesson. Sometimes you're in a position to protect someone else who's being abused. It doesn't mean to just, I love you even though I see you beating, my neighbor or something. That's not what we're talking about.
No.
Very important.
At the same time, so the kindness and the freedom of mind from which we can act, that comes from our side. How it manifests in the world can take many shapes. Some of these can be removing yourself from a difficult person. If you have the capacity and you can change their course and you can change their minds, you do it. But you don't burn fire with fire. You don't stop fire with fire. And certainly what we want as Buddhists and as practitioners, we want to act out of states of minds that are not afflicted. We cannot be responsible for other people. We can try and desire to help them and benefit them. That is always our intention. But the way that it manifests in the world can be very, very manifold. Sometimes we even have to be wrathful to prevent someone from inflicting harm on themselves.
You mentioned emotions are like a supercharged thought, so another cloud to try to dissolve from our blue sky. How does physical pain compare? I'm going through serious medical issues and have been having a tough time separating the physical pain from my sky.
So there are three kinds of suffering, and what you were discussing is something that in Buddhism we refer to as suffering of suffering. In other words, we know that we're suffering, but then when we dwell on the pain, we go through what is called suffering of suffering. To dispel that and to minimize that, you have to open the mind, and you do Tonglen. You include all the people who are experiencing the same identical thing as you and are experiencing pain. You start with that, and you're taking in their pain, and you're breathing in the dark and exhaling the light, and then you can expand it to all beings in all kinds of difficult and afflictive states that experience pain, because certainly samsara is experience of pain. It is another name for suffering. And as long as your mind knows that this pain is also temporary, it will become dispelled, and you can cultivate meditative state using pain as the very vehicle. It will certainly help you, and you can use that energy instead of directing it all onto yourself and deepening the pain and experiencing the suffering of suffering. You can expand it and use that energy to help others and yourself.
This person writes they're in a 40-day meditation challenge, and it's tremendously beneficial. They're learning about Yoga Vedanta. We don't have any experience in that, but if it's very beneficial, I'm sure it has lots of merit.
I'm happy for you.
How is the taming of the mind in meditation intended to materialize in life outside of meditation? Is the goal only to achieve the stainlessness of the mind during meditation, or is there meant to be a more permanent effect on the mind in day-to-day life? That's a very good question. It's similar to what I covered in the eyes open or closed thing. Absolutely. We're trying to bring this, what we're really cultivating is awareness, right? The stainlessness of the mind is the awareness of the mind, the awareness of the spaciousness in the mind. If we can bring spaciousness to our mind in our day-to-day life, right? Something as simple as dealing with your kids or your partner, something about them triggers you and they do something that annoys you or gets you angry. And it's, the practice of meditation and cultivating awareness brings a little space. So your habitual patterns and tendencies and reflex reaction, which might be to snap, to use harsh speech, to be kind of cold, you bring your awareness to that, have a little spaciousness, and be able to act with more kindness, basically. So absolutely, it's meant to be implemented in day-to-day life.
Yeah, we only cultivate the mind in order to bring benefit to all sentient beings. There is no other Buddhist method or reason to do meditation other than to bring benefit throughout everything, through all of our activity.
Should I repeat meditation each day? The key is to start to bring this practice and make it a regular aspect of your life. You don't have to do a lot every day. I would recommend, especially in the beginning, start with committing to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 minutes, but make it an event. You know what I mean? It helps to set up an inspiring little corner of your house with a cushion, maybe a photograph, a picture of a flower, the Buddha, of you. If you can. If you can't, just, make it as regular as you can. Anything, any skill, any kind of say like an exercise routine, even like the idea of taking vitamins every day. Those things only work if they become part of your routine. If you can't get to it one day, of course, whatever. But the key is to start to integrate this practice as a very consistent part of your day. It helps in the morning to kind of set your mind onto the path. It helps at night, to kind of settle down from the day and have a good night's sleep. You may want to do twice a day. Once, but try to get it as regular as you can is good.
Regular as you can, and very, very important is to set the right intention. In other words, the two purpose intention is to find the space of the nature of your mind, your cloudless, clear mind, so that you may engage the world with that kind of mind. And that engagement will always be positive. And, cultivating that intention makes meditation meaningful. It's not just a restful exercise, especially if you want to practice Buddhism.
Is there a purpose to suffering? And if not, why does the option to continue to self-grasp and remain imprisoned in suffering exist in our reality? Very good question.
It exists in our reality because of ignorance, because we, in our ignorance, believe that instead of being interconnected and being really in conjunction with everything and everyone else, we think that there are real things out there, and we posit ourselves on one side as a subject and in opposition into this dualistic system of conceptual thinking against everything else. It is nothing but ignorance, and from the ignorance arises habitual patterns. If we've never experienced the nature of our mind, it is difficult to do anything but exist on that level of suffering, which is another word for samsara. And that's why we practice, so that we may understand that's not all that there is. And we practice in order to undo it and to have freedom from suffering. Having freedom from suffering means, and has many implications. It means that we know our nature and we can function from that space.
Someone's asking about transcendental meditation. I don't know anything about it. I mean, if it works for you and it makes you, I don't really have any opinion on it. So this is all I know, what we're talking about here. But if it's good for you, it's good for you. Speaking of anger, what does Buddhism teach us about the right ways to express it? I know there's a concept of right speech. What does that mean, and how do we apply it?
You can measure the right by knowing if, when you're speaking or doing something, you always ask yourself two things. What is the state of my mind? The state of my mind is based on a desire to benefit, or am I just falling into a trap of thinking I'm doing the right thing, but I'm actually hurting someone? So we are either acting on the basis of affliction. When we're acting on the basis of affliction, the causes will be suffering, and there can be no other result. Negative actions will produce negative results. Or we are functioning out of the basis of our Buddha nature, as much as we are aware of it. And within that, we're always asking ourselves, am I benefiting? So then if you're hurting or benefiting. We can hide and play hide and seek, and we play all kinds of games with ourselves. But ultimately, we, at the core of everything, we can all answer that question. We know if we're doing the right or the wrong thing. We have to trust our Buddha nature. We have to trust the basis of our mind.
Someone asked for book recommendations. Go to Solidago Productions or YouTube Meditation with Michael Imperioli. We have a book list. It's time for me to take my kid and leave my abusive husband. It's hard because I know it will hurt him, and I will always love him in my heart. I gave him chances to change, and he's getting worse, but I have a safe plan. Anyway, I'm worried about him. And brokenhearted as this could ruin his life. Do you have any advice to keep peace and courage? He is a sociopath, and I'm sad for him. The emotions are a bit intense. Any advice about reactions?
As long as you always, if you continue to love him and you continue to keep a bond of love, but not in his presence and not being abused, you have to protect yourself, and you have to protect your child. You also have to, if you're removing yourself from someone who's abusive, you're also trimming down, you're reducing all the negative causes and things that he's producing, which will result in nothing but more suffering for him. So be sure that that's what you're doing, that you're doing it out of love for three of you, for your husband, your child, and yourself. You're doing it from the right causes. And if you maintain the bond of love, but not give in into the insanity, you maintain the bond of love, and you tell him that if he will work on his mind and he can change himself, then perhaps that situation that you're about to create right now for the benefit and for the safety of yourself and your child can shift, can change, and it'll give him a reason to want to change. It'll, once the anger pacifies, he will start to see if he wants to, if he loves.
How do you detach from repeated intrusive thoughts that cloud your consciousness? Exactly what we were doing today. Exactly by habituating. Actually, the word for meditation in Tibetan is gom, which means to habituate. So to habituate this awareness of our mind, and have a view that thought is the resultant of certain patterns, causes and conditions, and habitual patterns that we've kind of set in motion through our own ignorance and not understanding the true nature of our own mind. So this practice that we're talking about, making it something regular, making it something that you try to bring into day-to-day life, will without a doubt have an effect on repeated intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, and also try to cultivate positive states of mind through meditation, or just simply engaging in the world in a positive way. They will supersede the afflictive habituations, the afflictive addictions.
When you speak of freedom, do you mean freedom from negative thinking so that we are the best versions of ourselves?
100%. 100%. As I said, we can act with body, speech, and mind from two different grounds. In fact, we cannot act without our Buddha nature ground ever. But in reality, we can be afflicted, and so we can act out of afflictions and on and by our afflictions through that energy. When we say hurtful things, when we do hurtful things, when we, through our body, speech, and mind express the energy of affliction, or we can experience the affliction. We can understand that things are, that person is very afflicted and is causing us a lot of different things, but we can act from our Buddha nature. We can act from a deeper place, from a blue sky nature, mind. And it doesn't mean that we're ignorant about all the bad things that happen in the world, but we're free to choose because we're not thrown by the wind of affliction. Once we get into the whirlwind of affliction, we no longer have anything. Until that affliction, like a disease, until it just, dies down, until it takes its course, until it settles. But if we feel the stirring of the affliction and we just have patience and we have clarity and we just let it settle and then speak and do and, actions of body, speech, and mind, for sure, it's the only kind of freedom that can be spoken of.
First time meditating, I was really able to clear my mind, felt good. At the end, I got emotional, started crying. Is that normal? Absolutely. Absolutely. That is normal. If there's a story, a thought with a story that's kind of making you cry, you can kind of keep working with that and going back to the kind of technique and the practice. But yeah, you're settling the, we're not just really dealing with thought, but you're settling the, energetic channels of your body ultimately. And we'll get into that. We do get into that, kind of energy channels a little. We didn't today because we tried to focus on beginners today. But, that emotional energy, when you settle everything physically and mentally, very often will come up. It's totally normal.
Also, when the dust settles, when the activity of the mind settles, and you can see the nature of mind, the ground from which all activity fizzles up, you see such a vastness, you see such an expanse, and often it comes with, different kinds of sensations and emotions. So I hope that was the case and that's what you experienced. Once you experience that nature of mind, even a glimpse of it, that's what you always go back to. That's what you always bring. You always make sure that is the basis from all activities of body, speech, and mind.
Where can I forward this recording from my brother? This eventually will be posted and archived on the YouTube channel, Meditation with Michael Imperioli, YouTube. If I'm not a Buddhist, can I still meditate?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Because Buddha is not a religion, and Buddha is not just a philosophical system. Buddha is our awakened nature. It is the state of mind. It is an experiential basis of reality. So it's like saying reality belongs to this group or reality belongs to that group. It doesn't. It's, you know, beyond the labels and beyond the stickers and beyond the definitions. Being awake, which is what the word Buddha means, is something that we should all be. We should get out of the dream and the nightmare of afflictive emotions and become awake and become kind and become beneficial. And that's the real basis of all religions. All religions have the same thing.
Okay, last question. Now, if we didn't get to we pretty much got to everyone's question, which is great. But if you have further questions, Michael Imperioli, Meditation 101. Michael Imperioli, Meditation 101 at Gmail. And we'll get to further questions if you want. Some of my family members say hateful things to me, and I really try to respond in a positive way, but it doesn't work. The only thing that works is if I respond in a negative, aggressive way. How can I detach myself from their negative comments? I think, first of all, you have to define what you mean by it works or it doesn't work. I'm not sure what you mean by that. So let's put a pin in that. How can I detach myself from their negative comments? That's a good question. Well, there's a lot of ways to look at this. And like I said before, we're not allowing ourselves to be walked over, abused, be doormats, right? So someone in your family says hateful things. How do you respond in a positive way without indulging in our own poisons and our own afflictive emotions, as Victoria says? That's the challenge. The first thing is to become aware of what your mind's doing in response, right? If it's someone in your family, meaning you love them, you have to have a view that they're suffering under these hateful things they say. They're suffering and are making themselves unhappy because of their own hate or anger or afflictive emotions that they're indulging in and spilling out to you. You have to figure out a way of being honest, expressing yourself, defending yourself,
Without getting angry.
Showing them what they're doing, you know, kind of calling them out on their hateful behavior and saying that it is, in your opinion, wrong, without indulging in anger. That only makes you feel worse.
Yeah. It's like
this practice helps that, because like I said, what we're cultivating is awareness. So you're not just knee-jerk, you know, you're talking about family, so you're probably talking about very long-standing habitual dynamics that are rooted in the family, maybe for years, maybe for generations. So there's a lot of knee-jerk. There's a lot of habitual ways of relating, positive and negative, you know? So with awareness and with practice, you're kind of giving space to your mind so you can see that a lot of this is just habitual things, you know? A lot of this is coming out of your family members' negative view of themselves and negative view of you and negative view in the relationship and habitual view of the relationship. So the practice, this is not going to happen overnight just by hearing me say that. That's why we're talking about a practice. Practice means repetition, right? Over time, you can create a space in your mind and a space and have a little bit of, it's almost like, you know, when they broadcast live on TV or radio, they're on like a 7-second delay. In case somebody says something really kind of inappropriate, they can cut it out or stop the sound from happening. It's almost like we're creating that in our own mind. So instead of just a knee jerk, we have a little bit of space saying, okay, how do I want to react here? What's going to be most effective? And you can't do that just having a concept of that you want to do it. It has to come through a certain amount of practice.
Yeah, you cannot fight fire with fire, and you cannot fight hate with hate. I mean, just think about it in purely physical kinds of terms. There's a very effective practice. It's called Tonglen. So you do it on the spot. When somebody's being very hateful, you can, especially your family members that you cannot abandon, you love them. But really, it's all beings. You inhale their dark and you exhale to them the light energy, because every afflictive emotion is based on ignorance, and ignorance is often fueled by fear. This morning, my mother said, I said, I don't feel good. And my mother said to me, why'd you do the vaccine? You're putting this poison into your body. And instead of taking a moment and being a practitioner, I barked at her and I said, well, when you took your pacemaker, you weren't all anti-medicine. You had normal beliefs. You still go to the doctor every week. And then, of course, the remorse sets in. But, once you react that way, it's almost like all this sediment has been stirred and now it's polluting your whole body. And then you have to wait until everything goes down. Needless to say, Tonglen, and then calling her back and saying, I love you, I don't want to fight with you. And, if I can't change her right now, I can at least change the emotions that are in the space between the two of us. I think as a country, and just, I think in general, we always have these kinds of difficulties, especially with our loved ones, with those who are very, very close. But it's very, very important to try to change the crazy energy to the unpolluted, proper energy, because it's the only space within which we can function and breathe and maybe possibly change something to a better outcome. So always keeping in mind that all sentient beings have Buddha nature.
Well, today was wonderful. It's really inspiring to see so many new people here. That's really cool. I hope you come back. We're here most Sundays, sometimes Monday, sometimes Saturday. Usually Sundays, 10 a.m. Eastern. Sometimes we don't do it because we're traveling. I post on my Instagram Friday or Saturday with the link, so you can register, or you can always go to solidagoproductions.com. Thank you. We're going to dedicate the merit from today's class to the benefit of all beings, and also to our producer, Nick Solidio, without whose kindness and generosity and efforts, this would not be possible. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. See you next week.